Months passed with no sign of Emily Carter, and the days began to feel heavier for her family. Her mother still called her phone every night, letting it ring until voicemail picked up, just to hear her voice in the recorded greeting. Friends plastered missing posters across the Pacific Northwest, but rain and time wore them away, curling the edges until they peeled off telephone poles and bulletin boards. In the early months after her disappearance, the case drew a wave of attention. Local TV stations interviewed her family, national outlets picked up the story, and internet forums filled with speculation. People scoured Google Maps, looking for dirt turnoffs from the retreat's access road, imagining the routes she could have taken. Police search teams returned to the forest multiple times, bringing dogs trained to detect human scent. Each time the trail went cold within a few hundred yards of the lodge. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. By the first winter, the leads became fewer. One tip came from a man in Nevada who swore he had seen a woman matching Emily's description, buying bottled water at a small-town gas station. When police checked, security footage showed someone else entirely. A woman with similar hair but a different face. Another lead emerged when a hiker discovered a single running shoe tangled in underbrush, several miles from the retreat. For a moment, hope and dread surged through the investigation. Lab tests later revealed it didn't belong to Emily, dashing the possibility of a breakthrough. As months turned into years, the search became a pattern of raised hopes, followed by crushing disappointments. A private investigator hired by the family traced a possible sighting to coastal Oregon, where a woman had been seen sleeping in a car by the beach. Witnesses described the car as a hatchback, possibly silver. By the time the investigator arrived, the vehicle was gone. Theories swirled in online spaces and among locals. Some believed she had chosen to disappear, leaving behind the responsibilities and pressures of her old life to live quietly off the grid. Others were convinced she had been the victim of a targeted abduction. There were whispers about an argument she had with a fellow retreat attendee, though no evidence ever supported foul play from anyone at the lodge. A smaller group speculated that she may have been involved with someone who lured her away, but none of the theories explained why her bank account remained untouched, why she hadn't used her passport, or why no digital trace of her appeared after the day she vanished. Every anniversary brought fresh appeals. News crews returned to her mother's front porch, cameras capturing the framed photos of Emily smiling with friends, hiking in the mountains, or sitting cross-legged on a yoga mat. The police would issue the same statement. The case remained open and active, but there were no new significant developments. Behind closed doors, investigators quietly admitted they had exhausted nearly every lead. In 2017, a promising clue surfaced when a volunteer search group discovered a piece of fabric deep in the woods, faded but still intact. It appeared to match the color of a scarf Emily had been photographed wearing at the retreat. The lab confirmed it was the same material, but no DNA could be recovered. The discovery only deepened the mystery. How had it ended up so far from the lodge without any other trace of her? By 2020, the media had largely moved on. Emily's case was still listed on the missing persons database, but updates were rare. The world's attention shifted to other headlines, and her name appeared only in local papers on quiet news days. Still, her family refused to give up. Her brother kept a large corkboard in his apartment covered with maps, timelines, and printouts of old tips. Red strings connected dots across multiple states, though many of the leads were tenuous at best. The 10th anniversary was approaching, a grim milestone for any missing persons case. For most people, the belief that Emily might still be alive had faded into resignation. Yet for her mother, every day without confirmation of her death was a day where hope still had room to exist. The absence had become its own kind of presence. Her voice missing at family dinners, her chair empty during holidays, her birthday passing with no candles blown out. And then in the spring of 2024, a phone call would shatter the stillness and bring Emily's name back into headlines. Not because she had been found, but because her car had resurfaced in the most unsettling way imaginable. The call came from Phoenix police, late on a Sunday night. A silver Toyota Prius had been reported by neighbors for sitting motionless on a quiet residential street for nearly 2 days. At first, officers expected to find an abandoned vehicle. The windows were fogged over, and condensation streaked the glass despite the warm desert air. When they opened the door, the smell of stale air and faint incense drifted out. In the back seat lay a woman, pale and motionless, her knees drawn up as if she had been sleeping in a cramped position for hours. She was breathing, but shallowly, and her skin felt cool despite the heat outside. The officers quickly noticed the car's interior was unnervingly tidy. No purse, no phone, no receipts, no trash. Just a spotless cabin, and a set of neatly rolled yoga mats in the trunk. On the dashboard, sun-faded and curling at the corners, was a parking permit from 2014 for a yoga retreat in Northern California. One officer ran the plates and got an immediate hit. The car was still registered to Emily Carter, the woman who had vanished 10 years earlier. The match sent an alert through the system, and within hours detectives familiar with the cold case were on the phone with Arizona authorities. The woman in the back seat was rushed to a hospital. She was dehydrated and malnourished, but she regained consciousness within a day. She carried no identification and refused to answer questions, staring silently at the ceiling. When medical staff asked her name, she simply closed her eyes. She appeared to be in her late 30s, her hair long and dark, her hands calloused in a way that suggested years of manual or outdoor work. Forensics confirmed the car's VIN matched Emily Carter's missing Prius. The odometer showed it had been driven nearly 200,000 miles since she disappeared. Mechanically it was in good condition, as if someone had been maintaining it all those years. The tires were mismatched, suggesting replacements had been made piecemeal. There was no trace of Emily's personal belongings, no photographs and no clothing that could be tied to her. The only other items in the vehicle were a small cloth pouch containing loose change from various states and a single key on a worn leather keychain. The key didn't match the Prius or any known lock in the car. Fingerprints lifted from the interior revealed a startling connection. The woman in the hospital was Rachel Morris, a yoga instructor from Santa Fe, who had vanished in 2021 while traveling to Colorado for a retreat. Her family had spent years searching for her, unaware she might be moving around in a car linked to another missing woman from a completely different state and year. Rachel's disappearance had been equally baffling. Her last known location was a rest stop along an isolated stretch of highway. Her car was found there with the driver's door open, keys still in the ignition. Until now she had not been seen again. Detectives began to wonder if the Prius had been in the possession of multiple women over the years, each disappearing under unexplained circumstances. The clean condition of the car suggested a deliberate effort to remove traces of its history. The yoga mats in the trunk were all different brands and colors, as if collected over time from various sources. Forensic analysis of the interior found long strands of blonde hair matching Emily's DNA, shorter brown hairs matching Rachel, and a third type of hair belonging to an unidentified individual. The discovery shook both families. How had Rachel ended up in Emily's car? Had the two women known each other? And if not, what possible link could connect two missing yoga enthusiasts from different years and states? The investigators were careful with public statements, revealing only that the car was a key piece of evidence in what they now suspected could be a broader pattern. Privately, some officers speculated the vehicle itself might have been used to transport women from retreat to retreat, a moving cage that left no paper trail. Rachel remained silent in the hospital for days, ignoring questions, her gaze fixed on a spot in the corner of the room. Doctors believed her muteness could be a result of trauma, but whether she couldn't speak or simply wouldn't was unclear. Meanwhile, forensic teams worked to map the Prius's movements using toll records, license plate readers, and traffic cameras from multiple states. The initial results painted an eerie picture. The car had crisscrossed the country, appearing in small towns near national parks, coastal cities, and remote desert outposts. In nearly every location, it was spotted near yoga studios, wellness centers, or temporary retreat sites before vanishing again. The resurfacing of Emily Carter's Prius after a decade, with another missing woman inside, was no longer just a strange coincidence. It was the beginning of a much darker mystery that would only deepen with each new clue. The Prius became the centerpiece of the investigation. Detectives began piecing together its movements over the years, pulling records from traffic cameras, toll booths, and automated license plate readers scattered across the country. The data formed a strange and deliberate trail. The car rarely stayed in the same place for more than a few days. It had crossed state lines dozens of times, sometimes traveling hundreds of miles overnight. There was no predictable route. Sometimes it would vanish from view for months, only to re-ray in a completely different region. Patterns began to emerge. Many of the locations where the Prius had been spotted were within walking distance of yoga studios, wellness retreats, meditation centers, or remote campgrounds. In some cases, police obtained security footage that showed the car parked on quiet streets in towns hosting weekend retreats. No driver was ever clearly visible. When someone was seen, it was always a blurred figure wearing a hood or cap, moving quickly and avoiding cameras. Rachel Morris remained in the hospital under observation, physically recovering but still refusing to speak. Psychologists suspected severe trauma, possibly tied to prolonged captivity or fear of retaliation. She would react visibly when shown photographs of the Prius, her hands trembling slightly, but she offered no explanation. Her silence was frustrating for investigators, especially as DNA analysis confirmed that Emily Carter's hair had been inside the car along with Rachel's. More troubling still was the presence of the third unidentified DNA sample, a reminder that there could be another missing person connected to the same vehicle. Detectives expanded their search to other unsolved cases. They found at least 3 missing women from the past decade who fit a disturbing profile. All were involved in yoga or holistic wellness communities. All had disappeared while traveling alone, and all were last seen in areas that, when plotted on a map, overlapped with the Prius's known travel path. None of these women had any documented connection to Emily or Rachel, but the coincidences were difficult to ignore. In the middle of the forensic work, a small but significant clue surfaced. While inspecting the undercarriage of the car, a technician found a scrap of paper wedged behind a panel near the spare tire compartment. It was a torn corner of a printed map of the United States, creased and smudged with dirt. On it were several tiny red dots, each corresponding to a location where the Prius had been sighted. One of the dots, deep in the forests of Northern California, was circled 3 times in red ink. The marked spot was remote, far from the original yoga retreat where Emily vanished, but close enough to suggest a deliberate connection. A search team was dispatched to the circled location. After hours of navigating overgrown logging roads, they found a small clearing with the remains of a cabin. The structure was weathered and partially collapsed, but inside were items that sent a chill through everyone present. Meditation cushions, rolled yoga mats stacked in a corner, and a low wooden table with burned-out candles still in holders. Most disturbing were dozens of Polaroid photographs scattered across the floor. Each image showed a woman photographed from behind, faces hidden, heads turned away. The clothing and hairstyles varied, but one photo stood out, a woman with a long blonde braid, identical to Emily Carter's. The background in that image matched the grounds of the 20. There were no fingerprints on the photographs, or any other surfaces in the cabin. Whoever had been there had taken steps to erase physical traces, though not entirely successfully. Forensic teams found a faint shoe print near the cabin's entrance, but the tread pattern was generic, sold in countless stores. Wildlife and weather had done the rest, erasing most evidence of human presence. The discovery of the cabin shifted the case from a series of coincidences to a probable hunting ground. Investigators now suspected the Prius was part of a larger system, someone using it to move between retreats, selecting women who fit a certain profile, and transporting them to remote locations where they could be controlled or hidden. The cabin was likely just one stop in that cycle. Despite the gravity of the discovery, no suspect emerged. Witnesses from across the states where the car had traveled provided conflicting descriptions of anyone who might have been driving it. In some accounts the driver was male, in others, female. A few people even claimed the driver seemed to change entirely from sighting to sighting. fueling speculation that the car itself was being passed between people for reasons no one could fully explain. Rachel was moved to a secure care facility after her release from the hospital. She still avoided speaking about her time in the Prius, though she occasionally wrote short phrases in a notebook. Most were incoherent, but two stood out to investigators. "Never saw his face, and the car was never mine to drive." Those words became the only first-hand insight into what had happened inside the vehicle, and they raised more questions than they answered. With Emily Carter still missing, Rachel's return brought both relief and a haunting sense of incompletion. The Prius was locked away in an evidence facility, its silent presence a reminder that somewhere, someone still knew exactly what had happened to the women it carried. The Prius sat in the evidence facility under constant surveillance, its silver paint dulled by years of sun and rain, its windows reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights of the storage bay. Detectives continued to examine it, convinced that the car still held secrets they had yet to uncover. Every inch of the interior was swabbed, every seam inspected, but most of what they found was unsettling precisely because of what was missing. There were no fingerprints on the steering wheel, no smudges on the glass, no signs of the casual mess that usually builds up in a car that has been driven for years. It was as if the vehicle had been methodically cleaned after every trip, leaving behind only the smallest, deliberate traces. A more thorough search revealed something no one had noticed before. A false panel beneath the rear floorboard. Hidden inside was a thin envelope containing a folded map of the United States. This map was not torn like the scrap found in the cabin. It was intact with dozens of red dots scattered across the country. Most were small, but one, in the same Northern California forest where the abandoned cabin had been discovered, was circled multiple times in thick ink. Several other dots were marked with faint pencil lines, suggesting they had once been circled too, but the marks had been rubbed out. Investigators spread the map on a table and began cross-referencing the dots with missing persons cases. More than half matched the last known locations of women who had disappeared in circumstances similar to Emily and Rachel. Solo travelers often attending retreats or outdoor workshops and vanishing without a clear trail. The pattern was too precise to ignore. The Prius had been more than just a vehicle, it had been part of a carefully organized system. The most disturbing discovery came when analysts enhanced some of the Polaroid photographs from the cabin. In the corner of one image, barely visible in the shadows, was a blurred shape that could be a person standing behind a tree, their face obscured. Another photo, taken in what appeared to be a desert location, showed the outline of a vehicle's shadow, its shape consistent with that of the Prius. These details suggested that the photographs were not random keepsakes, but deliberate records, each tied to a specific location on the map. Rachel, still in the secure care facility, had begun to speak in short bursts during therapy. Most of what she said was fragmented, but a few statements were chillingly clear. She described waking up in unfamiliar places with no memory of how she had arrived there, always inside the Prius. She mentioned the smell of incense and damp fabric, the sound of soft music playing through the speakers, and the feeling that someone was always nearby even when she could not see them. When asked about Emily, she only shook her head, saying quietly that she was gone long before Rachel ever stepped inside the car. The investigation reached a deadlock. The DNA from the unidentified third person inside the Prius remained unmatched in national databases. Witness accounts of the car's driver remained contradictory. Surveillance footage showed only glimpses of shadowed figures moving in and out of frame. It became clear to investigators that whoever was behind this had been operating for years with meticulous planning, leaving behind just enough to unsettle but never enough to convict. The case gained national attention again when the media reported on the cabin, the photographs, and the map. Viewers are drawn to the eerie detail of the Prius, a seemingly ordinary car transformed into a moving prison. Armchair detectives dissected every clue, some proposing that the vehicle was part of a network of people who targeted women in the wellness community. Others suggested a single perpetrator who had shifted identities and appearances over time, making it nearly impossible to track. Despite the renewed interest, no arrests were made. Emily Carter's whereabouts remained unknown, and there was no evidence to confirm whether she was alive or dead. The map, the photographs, and Rachel's fragmented memories became the only pieces of a puzzle that might never be solved. The red-circled location in Northern California continued to haunt investigators. Its silence, its isolation, and the sense that it was not the only place marked for a reason. The Prius now sits in storage, untouched except by forensic teams, its engine silent, its odometer frozen at the last mile it traveled. To anyone passing by, it is just another vehicle behind a chain-link fence. But for those who have studied the case, it is something else entirely, a time capsule of movement, silence, and vanishing lives. Somewhere out there, the person who drove it still walks free, their identity hidden, their reasons known only to themselves, and until they are found, the fate of Emily Carter remains one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries in recent history. Months after the media frenzy over the Prius and the cabin, the case once again began to slip from the front pages. New crimes demanded headlines, and public interest shifted, but for investigators the sense of incompletion gnawed at them. The evidence was compelling yet fractured, like a jigsaw puzzle with most of the corner pieces missing. Behind closed doors, a small task force remained assigned to the case, combing through every overlooked detail in hopes of finding the thread that might unravel the whole story. The break came from an unexpected source. A wildlife biologist, reviewing motion-activated trail camera footage from a remote forest in Utah, noticed something unusual: a silver Prius creeping along a dirt road in the early hours of the morning. The footage was dated 3 years after Emily disappeared, but months before Rachel went missing. The timestamp placed the car in an area known for its isolated campsites, far from the nearest town. More startling was the faint shape visible through the driver's window, a figure wearing a featureless white mask. Investigators immediately traveled to the site where the footage had been captured. The road was rough and overgrown now, nearly impassable, but deep in the woods they found remnants of an old campsite, a rusted folding chair, fragments of incense sticks, and the charred remains of a fire pit. In the ashes were small, warped pieces of plastic, possibly from a disposable camera. Forensic analysis was inconclusive, but the location's proximity to a yoga retreat that had been held in the area that year raised new questions. Back at the evidence lab, detectives began reanalyzing the Polaroids from the cabin, this time focusing on the backgrounds. By comparing tree lines, rock formations, and light angles, they were able to match 3 of the photographs to specific locations in Arizona, Washington, and New Mexico. All sites where yoga retreats had taken place in the last decade. Each location matched a red dot on the map hidden in the Prius. The emerging picture was chilling. The car was not randomly moving between states, but was following a planned route tied to events that drew the same kind of people: solitary travelers, often women, seeking quiet self-improvement and connection. It became clear that someone was targeting these environments, blending into them just enough to avoid suspicion before disappearing with their chosen victim. Despite the mounting evidence, the investigation hit another wall. The masked figure in the Utah footage could not be identified, and no retreat organizers remembered anyone suspicious who fit the timeline. Interviews with past attendees only deepened the sense of unease. Several recalled brief encounters with strangers who seemed out of place, watching from a distance, but never participating. None of them could provide a name. Rachel's condition shifted slightly during this time. She began to draw in her notebook rough sketches of cabins, forest roads, and interiors of vehicles. One drawing in particular caught investigators' attention. It showed the back seat of the Prius, with a small black object tucked beneath the floor mat. Acting on the image, they returned to the vehicle and carefully peeled back the mat, discovering a coin-sized metal disc. At first glance, it seemed unremarkable, but it turned out to be a GPS tracking device. Unfortunately, it had long since been disabled, its memory wiped clean. The device's existence, however, reinforced the theory that the movements of the Prius had been deliberate and closely monitored. Someone had known exactly where it was at all times and had likely controlled its journey. Whether that person had ever been inside the car or had used others to drive it remained unanswered. Detectives considered the possibility that Emily Carter had been the first known victim of a pattern that stretched back even further than anyone realized. Cross-referencing older missing persons cases with the type of events marked on the map revealed more disappearances going back nearly 2 decades, though records grew murkier the further back they looked. If the same individual was responsible, it meant they had been operating with near-perfect concealment for years. The case was now less about finding one missing woman and more about stopping a cycle that had gone undetected for far too long. Yet with no clear suspect, no solid timeline, and no living witness willing or able to provide full testimony, the investigation remained in a limbo of speculation and fragments. The Prius, the cabin, the photographs, and the silent survivor were pieces of a story still incomplete. Some investigators feared the truth might never be fully uncovered, that the person behind it could simply stop, vanish into the anonymity of the world, and leave the trail cold forever. Others believed they were closer than ever, that one overlooked piece of evidence might still break the case open. For Emily's family, the years of unanswered questions had eroded hope, leaving only the need for closure. Whether she was alive somewhere or had been lost long ago, they wanted the truth. Until that day came, the silver Prius would remain a haunting reminder of a mystery that refused to stay buried, its silent presence echoing the movements of someone who had spent years mastering the art of making people vanish.